The Sword and Shield era Pokemon card market has been crazy hot over the last 6 months. We've been seeing some like amazing spikes in the value of some of the most desirable cards in the different sets released in the Sword and Shield era. So I wanted to take a look at what the Sword and Shield era market looks like right now, as across the board we're starting to see prices come down a bit from their peaks, which were like 2 to 3 weeks ago. So let's get into it. First, looking up at the most desirable card in probably all Sword and Shield era, the most valuable card in the set is the Moonbreon. It peaked raw Moonbreon peaked at $958 on TCG Player, and that was just what, 3 weeks ago. But now it's slowly starting to creep back down, and now we're at $791 as of recording today. And you can see the PSA value has gone down. Let's look at it on TCG Player. Look at this crazy spike over the last 6 months. This is 6 months ago. Like, this is insane. And for me, looking at this as a collector, one has to wonder what is going on. Why do we see crazy spikes across the board with the Sword and Shield era? And the only thing I can really look at is, one, what creates value, right? Scarcity, demand, and so like a supply demand, but also the scarcity of these cards. And these particular cards in general have been extremely like desirable. People really want these cards. And out of all the Sword and Shield era sets, Evolving Skies is probably one of the sets that's been ripped open the most just for this card. Let's look at the Rayquaza. Same thing we're seeing with Rayquaza, the second top hit in Evolving Skies. PSA value peaked at 660, 675. Now we're coming down 640-ish. But you could see these spikes peaked in May, and now they're slowly coming down, which is, it's good to see from a collector's perspective, because like these cards are extremely expensive. I mean, guys, we're talking 6 months ago, this card was $250. This was a really desirable card, right? $250 is a lot of money, right? But if this is a card you want, that seems reasonable. But the card to double in value within what, 3 months, as we see on this graph here, is insane. That's not what we've seen. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And what I think, this is Dom's opinion now, Pokeboy Dom, right? My opinion is, I think we saw an extreme amount of FOMO over the last 6 months regarding the Sword and Shield era sets. I've also seen, this is just me personally, and this is just my algorithm on YouTube, a lot of people talk about these sets from an investor perspective, and I think that's what's potentially affecting the FOMO that we're seeing. You know, all these Poke investors, in which I'm not one of them, but talking about this set, how it's going to increase, like, and we'll show you other examples. But I think there's FOMO being created in the Pokemon verse, at least in the collecting side, to warrant like these kind of spikes, because this is unheard. Like, this is crazy. 6 months doubling in value. The second hit in Evolving Skies. Let's look at Lugia. Lugia peaked also in May. It's 470 for the PSA 10. It's coming back down. The raw is kind of staying up there though. And here's the thing with this particular set, Silver Tempest. You can go to Pokemon Center right now and buy this booster box. This is one of the last sets released in the Sword and Shield era. Actually, I think it's the last one, because the next special one was Crown Zenith. But you could go right now to Pokemon Center, the official Pokemon website, and buy this booster box if you wanted to. So I think that's what is probably helping keeping, in particular, Lugia's value to keep stagnant after the spike. But looking at Blaziken, kind of seeing the same thing. The spike happened all the way in May, and we're starting to see a cooling off in the market. And that's just natural, right? Because for some collectors, when you get to these astronomical prices, it prices a lot of people out. Who, like, you're only almost spending $1,000 on one Pokemon card. That is insane. And yes, these are collectibles, and like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You know, people will spend money on what they value, but across the board, once you start getting to those high levels of value for certain cards, it's going to price out a lot of people. And I think that's what you're seeing with these cooling down is a lot of people got priced out and then the market responds, right? Okay, I can't sell it at this $950 price. Now maybe I can sell it at $925 and $930. I think that's what you're starting to see here in the raw market. And I love this website, pokedata.io, by the way. It pulls data from TCG Player, eBay, and this is where I get a lot of data. And something to consider too, when you look at PSA values, graded values of cards, you know, you look at the raw card at like 950 at the peak, right? But its PSA value is not even double. The PSA 10 is not even double at the peak. It's less than double. Double of 900 would have been what, 1800? And the peak is at $1,500 of PSA 10. So even if you got the Moonbryon, it's not a good target card if you're trying to get it graded to increase the value of its card. Rayquaza, it's a similar situation. Like, look, you buy Rayquaza raw at its peak. It's about a peak of 400, right? 500 right now. But the value of it PSA 10 is only 670. Like, that is not a good PSA target. So that's something to consider too when we're looking at all these prices is how does the PSA 10 value or potential value of a PSA 10 affect the raw value? Lugia is an interesting example because it's double, right? You get a PSA 10 Lugia, you're doubling the value of the card if it comes back at 10. Let's look at these are some other Sword and Shield era examples that I wanted to show you that the market is trying to cool down on and maybe potentially correct itself when it comes to these huge spikes. I mean, and this is across the board. This is one of the top hits in an Astral Radiance, a set that's not normally that desirable in the eyes of the Pokemon collecting sphere, like, you know, but it also spiked. I mean, this is tripled in value nearly, right? 700 times 3 is 210. It's nearly tripled in value the last few months. And again, it's potentially that FOMO that's happening, but at the top here, we're starting to see a flattening and coming down. Let me show you another. Okay, this is Crown Zenith. Again, spiked in May, but it's starting to come back down. Giratina, another top hit from Crown Zenith, spiked in May, and slowly it's coming back down. Espeon, I think the second hit, top hit, and because it's an EVL Evolution, but it's from the Fusion Strike set. It creeped up. It didn't spike as much like the Gengar did, which we'll see in a moment, but we're starting to see a kind of flatline. Gengar, like all the other sets, spiked in the middle of May. Raw value was $400 on TCG Player, 410 raw, and now it's slowly starting to cool off and come back down. I do like the Poke data because I get more actual data, but this is just an easy graph to look at, right? We can see the spike, boom. And now look at the TCG Player value. Like, this is insane. That's nearly a 10% difference. No, it's over 10% difference. 10% of 400 is 40, and we dropped by 60 something. So it's over 10% cooling off from the spike in middle of May on this one card alone, the biggest, most desirable card in the Fusion Strike set. We just saw Espeon spike. This is looking at a year. She's starting to cool off. I don't know, he or she, whatever. Celebi, which was like why did I want to look at this one? Oh, I wanted to look at this one in particular because it got affected, right, by the FOMO, by the spike in all, you know, was it all rising tides raise all ships? Spiked in May at 55, but the PSA 10 value just keeps creeping up and creeping up. And what's interesting about Celebi, it's a legendary Pokemon. There's a shining Celebi that's like the most desirable Celebi that was way back in the day. But this is an interesting Pokemon card from my perspective because it could be an ideal PSA 10 target. Because look at the value of the raw. The raw is $40, right? $43. But a PSA 10 value is at $180. That's what? Over a 4x difference. But you got to be careful because, yes, okay, you want to spend money on this particular card and, oh, if I get a PSA 10 and 4X's it, cool, but you got to make sure if you buy these cards and you're trying to like sell them or increase the value to sell them, can you actually sell the card? Is it that desirable that people are going to want to go out of their way and buy this Celebi? Like, that's something to consider when you're looking at PSA 10 values for the sole purpose of increasing the collection value to sell, right? Because people are doing that. That's just part of the market. Again, look at this spike. This is insane. And it's kind of stayed up there, but it's just slow, or they're slowly coming down. Giratina, we looked at this is the top hit from Lost Origin, the most desirable card. Again, we're seeing that peak of 480 in middle of May. Let's look at the 6 month. Just these insane spikes. It's cooling off and it's kind of staying stagnant though. So it'll be interesting seeing what this particular card does over the next few months. Now this one is not Sword and Shield era, but I kind of want to use it as a data point to show that there is a lot potential FOMO happening in the market right now to affect all these values. And Magikarp is one of them. Over the last like 6 months, I've been seeing a lot of content on YouTube. And again, this is just my algorithm feeding me like all the Pokemon content. This set, Paldea Evolved, has been one of those sets that has increased in value by a crazy margin over the last 6 months. And I've seen a lot of content, investor Pokemon content, specifically looking at Paldea Evolved and how it's going to go up. And when you've seen that content, speculative content increase, this value of the card has kind of followed that, right? But Magikarp in particular has gone from not being the top card in the set to all of a sudden, you know, being one of the most desirable cards. And again, it's all this FOMO around this because this is the oldest set released in the newest era, right? 2023, that's over just about a year ago now. But this set is easy to find. Like they're still potentially printing these. We don't know, right? We don't know what Pokemon is doing when it comes to printing values, but when it comes to the Sword and Shield era, it's almost certain like they're not printing these anymore. Almost. Right? Less supply, high demand, high price of value. And that's probably what we're seeing here with Paldea Evolved as well. So what does this mean for you as a collector? How does this data help you at all? I think one, it helps you understand that there is legitimate FOMO when it comes to the Pokemon market. There are people trying to make money. They're trying to invest in these Pokemon cards overall, and they're trying to, you know, and it's going to affect the market. So if you as a collector have certain cards that you want to target, it may behoove you to pull the trigger sooner rather than later, especially when the cards are at a cheaper value, because if you potentially wait too long, you never know what's going to happen, right? We can future spec all that we want. We can try to predict what's going to happen with the value of all these cards, but we will never be able to do that. We don't have crystal balls. So looking forward, what I'm learning from this is, you know, if this is like I almost bought this card last year at like 400-ish. I was kind of willing to do it because I wanted this for my collection. Now I'm definitely not willing to do it because it's doubled in value. Something to think about too as a collector is, you know, you'll see these cards at card shops, maybe in your local area. At least, you know, I live in the greater LA County area. There's a lot of card shops. So with the price fluctuating and changing so much, you got to be on your game when you go to these shops and you're looking up the value of these cards, because, you know, sometimes these, you know, they're going to want to make the most money that they can, but the value of the card may have dropped, right? And you can get it cheaper somewhere else versus in person in the shop. There are caveats to that though. In the person in the shop, you can actually physically hold the card. You can look at the card, especially if it's a card you want to grade, versus if you go on like eBay to try to find the card for cheaper. You know, and generally in person, you're going to pay a little bit more premium because the shop has higher margins they have to make because they have a physical location. So there's all these different variables that you have to consider when it comes to going after the certain cards that you want for your set. And if you want to continue to learn how to become a better collector, check out this video right here.